Well, thank you all again for joining us tonight. My name is Juanita. I am Canopy's Youth Programs Manager, and I will be co-hosting tonight.
My name is Jojo Flores, and I am a teen urban forester, and I will also be co-hosting.
For those who are unfamiliar with Canopy, we are a nonprofit organization that plants trees and cares for trees where they are needed the most. And we hope that one day every resident of the Min Peninsula can step outside to walk, play, and thrive under the shade of healthy trees. So one of the ways we want to make sure students are able to learn about the environment is by hosting these series. Today is actually our kickoff to our 4 event, and today's theme is environmental justice. And you're going to hear from wonderful guest speakers doing amazing work in their field. I won't say too much because they will have the chance to introduce themselves. But on this call, we have Anna, Megan, and Arlene.
And just for some Zoom etiquette, if you agree with something, you're more than welcome to share hearts or confetti. If you would like to ask a question, you may raise your hand at any time or type in the chat. And just a reminder to please keep yourself muted until we open up the floor to all.
And then just kind of like logistics. So the format for today, all panelists will be asked the same question. You will have 3 to 4 minutes to respond, and then we will choose the order, and then we will, once everyone has responded, we will jump into the next question. So far, does anyone have any questions? Okay. So thank you again, Anna, Arlene, and Megan for joining us. It looks like we have a pretty good group on the call. So the first question is introductions, so that we can all get to know you a little bit better. So the question is, tell us about your job. What attracted you to it, and what does your day-to-day look like? And let's go with Anna, Megan, and Arlene for the order.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Juanita, and hi, everyone. Thanks for joining this panel. Do you mind showing the slides?
Yes.
There's a couple photos. So yeah, you can see my background here. Does anyone know what plant this is? Which crop? It's hard to see, maybe. Maybe write it in the chat if you have any guesses. It's a green vegetable, but that doesn't help too much.
It kind of looks like fennel, but I really can't.
Yeah, it's fennel. Yeah. Great job. Yeah, that's awesome. Kale. Kale's also a really good guess. Yeah, sorry, it's kind of small. But anyways, I am an agricultural soil scientist. So I work in fields such as these and care a lot about how we grow food and how that food gets to people like you. And just wanted to show these kind of funny photos because my path to kind of get here was I used to work for a farmer in high school and just really thought it was the coolest thing that you could plant these tiny seeds and then they would grow into this, you know, these vegetables that you would find in Safeway or something. And so I really loved growing plants and working in, we had a greenhouse at my high school. And so I kind of worked in the greenhouse and would grow vegetables, and my parents could never keep any plants alive at home. So that was something I was really interested in. I had a teacher in high school who was like, oh, I'll just teach you how to grow things. And I really fell in love with that whole process. So I study soil science. And if you want to go to the next slide. Should be, yeah. So I started studying soil science. So I worked for the farmer in high school, and then I loved teaching and agriculture education. And I don't know if any of you are in like an FFA program or the Future Farmers of America, similar to 4-H, but for high school students. And I really loved it and wanted to go into teaching. So I went to UC Davis and got to like really get a lot of hands-on experience. So this is me with another big green leafy vegetable. And I also took tractor driving as like part of my college degree. which was super fun. I also took wood shop and welding and lots of plant and soil classes. So I like loved working outside, and I knew I couldn't sit at a desk all day, and I wanted to be out in the field measuring some things and taking samples. So if you go to the next one, maybe, or two slides, maybe another one. Yeah, so then I did my undergrad and my bachelor's in agricultural science, and then decided I wanted to get more of like the environmental perspective of farming in general. And so I got to go to this program in Sweden actually, and do this master's program in sustainability, and got to meet people from all over the world. And it was really a cool experience. And now it makes me think about doing soil science research very, very differently. I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of the other slides. I should have put them in better order. But yeah, so my primary day-to-day is I do a lot of work in the laboratory. So we'll go out, we have a field site kind of like this one here, and we actually work in the Salinas Valley, an hour and a half south of people who are around the East Palo Alto area. And we are measuring kind of how different nutrients are moving through the soil and the air and the water. And that's really because there's like a really problematic challenge with groundwater pollution in the valley due to fertilizer use, as there is in a lot of agricultural regions. And it's mostly the people who live and work there who have to drink this water that's super contaminated. So thinking about like how we can use different farming practices to try to keep the nitrogen in the soil and not into the air or water is my primary focus. So we go out to the field sites and we actually we dig a lot of holes. That's a lot of my job. So I'll start going every other week, and we dig holes down to 1 meter in depth, and we collect soil and bring it back to the lab and then measure different things on it over time. We also have these straws down in the ground that we can pull up water from the ground, and we can measure that as well. And then we have these big chambers that open and close that measure gases. And then of course we take plant samples as well. So I do a lot of that. We bring it in the lab, and then I'll analyze it on different machines. And then essentially I will write code to kind of analyze and plot all of the data. And then our kind of goal is to kind of bring it back to the community and also the water board. We're working with the policymakers to help give ideas and incentives for different farming practices to try to reduce the water pollution. So some field work, some computer work, also lab work. And it's a lot of fun. I love time outside.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. It definitely seems like a lot of fun, but also a lot of work. And I know you mentioned coding. So if there's anyone interested in like tech or STEM, there's opportunity for you to code, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anna.
Mm-hmm.
Let me go ahead and stop sharing.
Is it my turn now?
Megan?
All right.
Yes.
Can you all hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Perfect. Thanks, everybody. Good evening, y'all. My name is Megan Nguyen. I use they or she pronouns, and I'm so excited to be here with y'all today. To answer this question is really hard for me because I feel like I wear a lot of hats, literally and figuratively. I guess if we're going to talk about traditional jobs, my job is doing like events. So I put on community events for the Peninsula Open Space Trust. Raise your hand if you actually went to our office, if you were one of the ones that toured our office. Awesome, cool. Well, I was sad to miss y'all that day, but y'all kind of saw what we do, what kind of office life is like there. But what I do specifically is I put on free events for the community to connect people to nature and nature to people, and sometimes people to build more community together. So I do anything from speaking to events. Oh, Allie, you went to the Wild and Scenic Film Festival. Awesome. I'm so glad you were there. So yeah, we host things like film festivals. Sometimes we bring in a falconer who has birds, like this owl that I'm holding, and we get to show that around to community members, families, anyone who's interested in chatting with us. And a lot of the times I look like what, kind of like an adventure explorer, because I'm just out in nature, bringing people out on hikes and getting them excited to be outside. So that's like my traditional day job. and what I do. And these are just some of the events that I host to give you a snapshot of what that would look like. We've hosted speakers like author James Edward Mills, who's a Black adventurer and National Geographic explorer, on this event called Finding Joy and Justice in the Outdoors. And that was, he's a good friend of mine and really cool to kind of see, you know, like Black people having fun and like being adventurous. And that was a huge part of like the goal of that event, was to show diversity and representation. Speaking of that, I also hosted the Representation Matters Film Festival last month. It's the second time doing it, but really stemmed from my experience not seeing a lot of people of color in the field that I work in, and wanting to have a stronger sense of belonging in the outdoors for people to feel more comfortable. So that's why I created events like Queers of a Feather, which is like an LGBTQ affinity group for people who want to just build community with other queer people and just go outside and enjoy nature. Anna, I see that you also love braiding sweetgrass. Yes, we hosted Dr. Robin Wall-Kimmerer, who's the author of Braiding Sweetgrass, and writes this book about Indigenous knowledge and plants, and is so amazing. And so we host a lot of different types of speakers that talk a lot about justice topics. So even though I don't technically work for an environmental justice organization, there are things that we do that kind of fall into that. And that's kind of a theme that I want to share, is like, you don't necessarily need to be in an environmental justice org to do environmental justice, because I for sure don't. And I like do everything I can to kind of bring that to the forefront. And I also wanted to show that we've shown movies like Princess Mononoke, which is not the traditional like I guess vibe when you think of like a environmental movie, but it's like the intersection of that people sometimes don't have access to go into nature, but we access nature through films. So that's one way we can like kind of bring more equitable access to people. The other hat I wear that I wanted to share is that I'm an activist, and I'm also often on times like speaking truth to power, doing direct action, blockading things, and fighting for a livable future, because I believe we can build a better world. And so this is kind of like, I have a video of that. Let's see if we can play, but kind of give you a sense of what I do and the energy that I bring, which is a skill. And if you have this skill, if you're like typically a loud person, this is something that you can do too. And it doesn't have to be academic. So yeah, this video really shows that so many people came out to Sacramento to call upon Biden and Gavin Newsom to end fossil fuel permitting, extraction, and declare a climate emergency. And we dropped this huge banner across Tower Bridge on Sacramento. It's like I think like almost 150 feet long. Banner that we created, dropped it. There's also paddlers in the water, as you can see down here. And so like a big part of it is staging these big actions to send a message, because we've tried calling, we've tried voting, we've tried advocacy, and sometimes you just got to show up into the streets and take them and make some noise, you know? So that's kind of work I do as an activist. And yeah, so I tell myself that I like to say that I am a storyteller, I'm an activist, I'm a community builder, and I bring all of these skills into my job, no matter where I'm at. And I'm always like speaking about justice, and I root it in my own experience growing up as a person of color and a first generation Asian American, a daughter of immigrants growing up in Sacramento. I also went to school at UC Davis too, Anna, and studied environmental policy, which I can also answer in that second question that you have, Juanita, about like how I got here. But I think I took a lot of time, so I'm gonna pass it to you, Arlene. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Megan.
Hi, y'all. Thank you. A lot of y'all know me already as the community forestry coordinator for our branching out program. But I do a number of different things for that position specifically. It was hard for me to kind of describe it in the beginning because there's so many parts to my work. A big part is staying active in our communities and finding partnerships with residents, orgs, nonprofits, schools, or anyone else that's willing and able to help expand the urban forest in our local communities. And also another part is when that's not really working out, I know a lot of you guys have helped me do a lot of outreach and conduct intentional outreach to do neighborhood plantings. And that's another big part of what I do. On top of that, I also source trees, inspect them for quality, purchase them for our tree plantings, and just get all the logistics coordinated with that. And I never do it alone. It's always in a collaborative team effort. And another piece of what I really love to do at Canopy is there's a lot of opportunity to work on the strategic plan, which has been going on for a few years. And I'm not a Jedi expert in any way, shape, or form, but I've gotten to work with a lot of great people on staff, Juanita being one of them, and just advance on some of the goals that we've been trying to collectively work on as an organization. And that's really honestly something that I truly have been loving this past year. But yeah, I just had a little short one. So I'll pass it back to Juanita.
Yeah, thank you, Arlene. I think a theme that I saw in you and like as well as everyone else is this is not like a solo work, and this is a team effort to kind of get the job done. And just hearing other people's viewpoints, ideas definitely makes kind of like the whole job a bit better. So thank you all for answering the first question. I'll hand it off to Jojo for the following question.
So for our second question, what was your journey to this line of work, and did you see yourself in this career path, and why or why not? And for the order, let's start with Megan, Arlene, and Emma.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, let me try to go fast because I don't want to take up too much time. But my journey really started, I guess, like, okay, it started with I went to a Buddhist boarding school for 4 years. I lived on a Buddhist temple. It's not everybody's like average experience, but that really like rooted my environmental like passion. Then I went to school at UC Davis. I knew exactly, I was like, I learned about climate change. I learned about like my impact as a person on the world. And then I had like a duty to do. Like I felt empowered to make a lot of change. So when I went to school at Davis, I took this class called eco-geomorphology, which sounds like a made-up word because it is, but it was like this experiential learning course that took us to Yosemite. And it was my first time in Yosemite, and it traced, we followed the Tuolumne River all the way in Tuolumne Meadows down into the river and learned about every section of the river and where our water comes from, especially like living in San Francisco, our water comes from Yosemite. So it was really cool to see the source of where our water comes from. So this is me, the first time Yosemite, super excited to be here. My background's also Yosemite. I literally just went there this weekend. Such a special place in my heart. And this course is exactly where I learned that trees weren't just trees anymore. Rocks weren't just rocks. They became granite, pillow basalt, cottonwoods, redwood trees, rainbow trout, salmon, steelhead. And I learned so much about the world around me that once I knew about it, I felt like I could be a steward and kind of share that information to other people, and I could protect it. I was so inspired that I became a whitewater rafting guide because I wanted to have fun on the river and teach people about the river at the same time. And I did this, I became a guide for 2 summers on the South Fork American River. And experiences like this really opened my eyes to what outdoor adventures could look like, what environmental science could look like. And it could be fun. It's not always in a lab. It's not always behind a computer. It's being outside. And that's where I thrive. I started working for an organization that protected fish and rivers. And so I got to see so many cool rivers in California, like Moss Bray Falls near Mount Shasta, the left side here. I got to see so many cool fish. This is the California state fish called the golden trout, which I caught in the golden trout wilderness in the Eastern Sierras near like Mammoth and Bishop, which is south of Yosemite. And I just got to see the world in a whole new lens. And it's really because I was just lucky through and actively sought opportunities that would put me in these places. And I really have to, credit my college courses for that. So I did a little bit of the environmental science. I really enjoyed it, but I was also a very passionate advocate and doing policy work. I thought I was going to be like in policy, going to be like governor, president, like Leslie Knope, if you watch Parks and Rec. I was like, I'm going to change the world. So I did advocacy work with the United Nations Association. I went to the UN, advocated for the global goals. I made phone calls for Bernie. I was like doing everything, doing the most, but I definitely feel like my pivotal moment was when I learned about the climate crisis and how fossil fuel companies are actively destroying our planet and extracting resources and polluting our air and water and causing catastrophic wildfires that we've seen every year in California. And they knew about all this stuff in the 70s and they chose to ignore it. They chose to blame individual people. They invented the whole idea of a carbon footprint. That stuff is false, y'all. Like, they're trying to put, that's when I realized that the environmental movement is not about shorter showers. It's not about bringing your reusable bags. It's not about, saving plastic straws or whatever. It's about fighting against fossil fuels and these big corporations. And so I found the Sunrise Movement, which is a movement of young people dedicated to fighting the climate crisis. And we trained hundreds, thousands of people to do direct action across the country, and we would like blockade things. We would, take the streets with marches, and we even went to DC and shut it down at the White House. And we know that direct action works. We helped elect Jamal Bowman. We made 1 million calls for him. Cori Bush as well. AOC was a huge supporter. And we shut down all like 7 entrances of the White House in June of 2021. And so we've seen that direct action works because something I've been working on, which is passing the civilian climate court, which I hope will pass soon. Like you guys will get the benefits of it because the American Climate Corps promises that anyone who wants a good green job will get one. So if you especially want to work in reducing, carbon emissions, building like advancing environmental justice is listed one here, building healthier and resilient communities. It's basically like the Peace Corps, but for like American Climate Corps, right? So like this is like a huge effort that we tried to fight for 3 years, and we finally got it passed last month. And so that's a huge win and something that's rarely seen, but it really gives me passion and energy to know that like activism works, and this is what it's like. This is what I do it for, is to build a better future for all of us to live in. So, through that, I got recognition, won an award as the 2020 Emerging Leader Award recipient for River Network. This video is not going to play, but I'll link it in the chat if you want to watch it. But I highly recommend y'all, if you're doing extra work, especially if it's unpaid or volunteer, there's award money that people will pay you to give. They'll give you money for doing awesome work. They'll recognize you. And this literally helped launch my career because it put me in touch with so many different community members. My name started getting recognized more. My face also got recognized more. And this really was a huge recognition for me. So I highly encourage y'all to seek more opportunities. But yeah. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Megan.
Thanks for sharing, Megan. I'm up next. Honestly, activism is intense. I definitely props you for that. I think I've shared my story with a few people, but I'm originally from Orange County. I was, after high school, unsure what to do, so I just went to CC. I've always been really good at math and science, so I naturally took that route, was encouraged to take that route, fell in love with chemistry, and I think my second year, I can't remember, I was taking OChem, the Physics 2 series, and Calc 2, and was just really unhappy with kind of like the curriculum that I was taking, kind of just like the overall education that I was getting. I felt like I was like really missing something. I've always been like really grounded in my community, and have a really big background of like camping with my family, and that's always just been like a part of my life. But at that semester, my little brother had just graduated high school as well. He was a DACA student, so he had his whole situation going on with that, but he was working with one of my cousins, kind of like just doing landscaping, and he had a heat stroke. So funny, that was not even my story, it's his, but he had a heat stroke and he was hospitalized for a week. And it was just really like traumatizing for us, kind of just experiencing that and not even realizing that it could really happen to folks. And that's kind of when I started getting into the environmental justice field, started learning a little bit more about like these situations and circumstances that people come across, and it's not just anybody. Environmental change or like climate change is really going to impact our most vulnerable communities, even just here in the States and the global South, stuff like that. And I started really getting into that, and I actually dropped all my classes and I took a counseling class, and I completely pivoted, and I still really liked the STEMs and sciences, and it was really hard for me to navigate what to do next. And I actually love what you do, and I was really interested in agriculture, and I was looking at Cal Poly's SLOWS program, and ultimately ended up going to San Jose State and transferring there, and doing their their intersectional approach was just really exciting for me. I think they also do a lot of really great work with community-based organizations. And when I came out here, I had never even visited the Bay Area before. I had no family, I had no friends. But immediately, I think the environmental movement here is so strong. And I was able to connect with a lot of nonprofits, learn a lot about different work that involves the environmental fields. And then I was doing watershed stuff. I was doing food justice things. I was doing education, environmental stewardship, things like that. And when I graduated, I still wasn't sure what to do. But a lot of you guys know Maya. Maya used to be the branching out coordinator before me. Now she's our advocacy associate, but she knew my advisor from San Jose State, and she shared the job opening, and I got it forwarded, or the whole class got forwarded, but I applied, and I just love it because I think anytime I've made a really big decision in my life, it just feels right. And even though I've always been a part of the natural world, I've always been around it, I never really thought it was going to be my main focus in my career. But it has been. And urban forestry, when I first started this job, I really knew nothing. I really, truly knew nothing about urban forestry, but now I know a lot. And so many things started clicking for me when I started working here. And there's like this third eye that opens up to like this world that it's always been present. Trees have always been in my life, but not to the capacity that you really appreciate, like once you actually know what they do for you and how much they protect you and care for you. But yeah, that's my story. I'll pass it to Anna.
Thank you, Arlene.
Awesome. So great to hear from both of you, and so many similarities through my as well. I can just share maybe the screen again. Work. Yeah, I wanted to also mention before I go into this that I didn't really like science in high school. I always was just very excited to like get out and work at the farm and be outside. And I feel like I learned so much just from practicing, I guess. And then went to college and finally had to actually learn science and really struggled. And I took like several prep chemistry classes and took biology twice. And, then finally, once I started to really understand and learn how to do it all, I really liked it. And now I try to teach students with like a different perspective than just like memorizing stuff, right? Like there's actually such cool applied science, like how trees work, and then talking about like, okay, let's stand under a tree. Can you feel how cool, the temperature is? How does that work? And how do they cool us? And yeah, I think that kind of approach is something that I'm really passionate about and trying to change how we teach science today. But like both of them, I'm very passionate personally about trying to like actually make a difference in not only the work that I do with my career, but my own personal life and my own personal journey. And this is just a picture. So when I was in Sweden, I participated in the Fridays for Future Greta Thunberg events, and it was awesome because we would have our teachers come out with us and protest, and they would have signs with like scientific data that's peer reviewed, meaning that other scientists had kind of said that was like official in the traditional knowledge of academia, that was like kind of considered kind of supported. And I thought this was so fantastic, and I knew I wanted to be a scientist that did work in science that really mattered and helped to empower communities. And like, has been mentioned, there's been lots of kind of corporate groups taking advantage of the fact that we don't we didn't have all the numbers, and we do, and we've known that for so long, right? We know the data, we have the data, we don't need any more of the data. So at first I was like, I actually wanted to be an environmental lawyer because I said, we have all the science, we just need to do something about it. But then again, like I mentioned, I didn't like sitting at a desk for so many hours inside. So I was like, okay, I want to be outside working. And the biggest thing in both of them mentioned is just community. So I also feel super, super lucky and supported to work with teams of people and also in community. So the picture on the left is me with a lot of other students eating like a community meal. I'm super passionate about food and sharing food and getting access for everyone to have safe and nutritious food as part of my work. So like I mentioned,
Wait, Anna, we can't see your screen.
Oh no. Okay.
Try resharing again.
Maybe Juanita, can you share?
Yes.
Sorry, I was just talking and you were all like, I don't know what you're saying.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you know which slide you want me to show first?
Yeah, 11.
11. Okay.
Thanks, Megan. Okay. Oh. Okay, awesome. If not, it's not a big deal. But okay, can you see the photos? Awesome. And of course with the soil background because I am a soil scientist. So yeah, this is the right is the Fridays for Future protest, and then the left was a community meal that I try to organize community meals a lot, and I'm also really passionate about food waste and things as a separate kind of side. And so I'm really, yeah, I feel very strongly about trying to share the food that we have. And then the other part of my research is how do we actually use all of this extra waste and nutrients in the environment that already exists to kind of replace fossil fuel-based fertilizers and also build our soil while thinking about this environmental justice perspective of water quality and pollution. So it kind of all ties together, I guess, is what I'm trying to say here. Do you mind going to the next? Yeah, so cool. So this is the depiction of my research. So thinking about how we manage the soil and then working with farmers to really understand like how they make decisions and how those are going to be affected. And then these arrows are thinking about all the different gases and nutrients that are kind of going in between those two things. But yeah, sorry, I'm also talking a lot. But basically I was like super into farming, and then I thought I wanted to go into education and then policy, and then realized I also had no idea like what it meant to go to graduate school or that you could be a farmer or as a farm scientist as like a real like career. So now I'm like paid to be a scientist and have really enjoyed kind of continuing to go to school, and it's possible that you can get funding and scholarships and kind of just, yeah, make it happen, I guess, in that sort of thing. And I had an advisor that had said from UC Davis had said like, oh, you should really apply to keep going to school, and helped me through that. And so now I also feel very, very strong about trying to help all the students that I work with who are interested in continuing to go to school navigate that process, because it's kind of a black box in that sense. I think I'll stop there and then can share the rest for the next question.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Let's move on to the next question. I think all of you slightly touched on this, but please feel free to expand. Who or what inspired you to start this field or to start this journey for wanting to care for the environment? Let's see. I think Arlene hasn't kicked it off. So let's go with Arlene, Megan, and Anna for the order.
I wouldn't say someone inspired me specifically to start this journey. I think there's just been like a series of things in my life that have like navigated me to like where I am today. But there's definitely people that feel my passion and my energy and like continue to want me to be here and be present as hard as it is. And that's definitely my community. I am nowhere near home, nowhere near my family. But working in the branching out communities, I connect with people that I would, connect back at home, or like that sense of like, okay, I like know you some way, or like you're familiar to me. And then just having like a voice, and having, honestly, in this position, I do have power to like plant trees in specific areas in our community. So I feel like even just with that, I'm like conscientious of how I navigate the outreach efforts. So kind of just like keeping our communities in mind, and how that ties back to my family, and just how that ties me back into the work too.
Thank you, Arlene.
I'm right there with you, Arlene. I love community for sure. It definitely fills my cup. I would also say nature inspires me to protect the environment. I feel like this is kind of like hippie, but like literally this was me this weekend, just like vibing and absorbing the sunlight, and just like putting my feet in the water and just relaxing as I'm surrounded by like all this beautiful scenery. And I notice how it changes my body and how I feel, just to be able to like breathe deep, like clean air, and like swim in clean water that's not polluted. And how like, I guess, valuable and rare that is, growing up in the suburbs of Sacramento. I mean, we had like neighborhood parks and stuff, but we didn't have like rivers we could really like rivers we could swim in without like going far. And I just feel like once I started getting opportunities, like going to summer camp, going to college, and being taken to places that I never would have found on my own, I really started to realize this. And unfortunately, I feel like we live in a capitalistic society that really like tells us that we need to produce more, succeed. And that's something that was a value that was instilled in me by my parents, who were Vietnamese refugees. And they legit went through some trauma. They had to survive like war and like live in a new country, didn't speak the language, and instilled all these values of safety and needing to like work hard and achieve, which I feel like I do, but at the same time I don't feel like I'm living my life if I'm just grinding away doing something that I don't really care and passionate about, right? And so I feel like what brings me joy and what brings me like sustains me is just being outside, and sometimes hugging a tree, touching rocks, swimming in, cold water, just feeling the sensations in my body. And like, that's, once I'm able to feel connected to the environment, I'm like, this 100% needs to be protected for the future, because we all live in California. We know the wildfires. I want to be able to breathe clean air every summer and not have to like deal with the smokiness and, like things like that, which I feel like we know we need to hold accountable to that. So that's kind of like what fuels me, is like, I want to protect nature because I want to enjoy it for now and for the future. What about you, Anna?
Yes, I always say that I feel like the earth, not to be all hippie, but the earth is our home, we have to take care of it. I once went to the best talk I think I ever went to at a waste like plants, basically thinking about like visiting a landfill. If you don't know, where we like throw things away, they don't go away. And one of the directors, he was saying that pretend like we live in like the earth is actual physical house, right? Like, where are you supposed to put your trash? And then I guess he would ask little kids this question, and they would say like, oh, under my sister's rug, or like in our backyard or something. And it's like, eventually you're gonna not have more space for like your trash to go. And like, how will that treat, our home? You wouldn't treat your own house that way. So I think that kind of analogy of thinking about like the earth is really our home, and we need to take care of it because it has the people that we love in it, right? Or the friends that we haven't yet met. Yeah, I didn't mean to get all poetic, but I feel like that's how I really feel in terms of that. And it's exciting because I get to work with lots of younger students who already kind of know like all these challenges. They've learned about climate change. Like, I didn't learn about all of this stuff, until I got into college. And I think we know and care about it, and there's people who want to do something. So I think like, just find something that you're interested in and like brings you passion and joy, but also can serve kind of this bigger piece of like, it's overwhelming if you look at all these problems in one type of like vision. But if you think about, if each of us do a small different part of like different, parts of sectors of the planet, and like what we work on different things, then we can all kind of together combine our efforts to really make a difference. And that's how I try to stay motivated and try to convince my family as well, that their actions make a difference. Because I argue with them a lot. You try to tell everyone, and then your own family is arguing with you back. So yeah, but I would say that my teacher in school was the one who said, like, oh, you're interested in, like, you should apply for graduate school, and he supported me to do that. So also, if any of you are ever interested, please feel free to email me. I think they'll hand out the emails or send them out afterwards, and I can help you kind of navigate that journey, because it's exciting when you find something that you're super passionate about, that you want to keep studying it. Not that school is for everyone, of course, but if you find the right topic, sometimes it is. Yeah, I love these comments. Okay, I'll let you move to the next.
Thank you, Anna. I think I just want to highlight, I feel like we can definitely feel the passion and this true like urge to want to help, like genuinely help not only the environment, but also the people. So thank you all for the wonderful work that you do. I'll hand it over to Jojo so he can ask the following question.
So the next question is, how does your identity influence your work in environmental justice? And for the order, we'll go with Megan, Anna, and Arlene.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, Megan. So just kind of like a time, maybe if we can keep it to like a minute, because there's one last question we want to ask before we open it up to the floor. Just a time check. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I will just say my identity and my experience is everything. It's the lens that I use and ground myself in the work every day. So, I don't think I like use it as like a bargaining chip or whatever, like to be like, oh, look at me, and whoa, like it's not about that. I find strength in my identity, and I'm gonna take up space because we need to see more POC people and more representation leading this, because people of color face climate change the first and worst, because of historic racism, because of inequities, also people who are low income. So 100% my identity is is the lens that I use to fight for people who in my community who look like me, but also who may not have a voice, because honestly, fighting for climate change is a luxury, because some people are really worried about putting food on the table, or just like worried about these real struggles in life. And I feel like I'm well privileged and positioned well enough that I can kind of take that on to fight collectively for everybody. So I'll just leave it as that, as like, I think our story, our voices is our power. And so my voice and my identity is my power, and I'm going to share that.
Thank you, Megan. I think Anna was next.
Sorry, I'm next. Okay. Yeah, I don't think I mentioned this, but I grew up in a really tiny town in the northern part of California, like almost to Oregon, so like 6 hours north of San Francisco, right on the coast, in like a very small farming community, dairy farming community of like just over 1,000 people. And so I find that when I work in agriculture, in my work now, that I actually have a very my understanding of what the rural, like the challenges in rural cities and communities are, and also just with like having a rural livelihood, like my own family, I feel like I can combine my like studying of carbon and nitrogen, right, more of the like drier science data, with like actual behavior and emotions and feelings and needs of the people that I work with in the communities that I work in. And I feel like that is something that I'm not trying to like get the farmers in trouble, right? I'm trying to help find solutions that will help the local communities, the water quality itself, and also like farmers stay in business. So that's something that I try to keep in mind with that in terms of my personal background, especially.
Thank you, Anna.
That was really great. I wish I could just copy and paste everything that Megan and Anna said. But to this question, I guess in all honesty, I was hired at Canopy 2 years ago. And at the time staff were majority white. So I actually did have a bit of a difficult time like trying to bring my full authentic self to the space. And it probably wasn't like until maybe like a good year in where I really felt like I could bring my full like personality and jokes and like my full self in. But I think like to the point of bringing your identity into your workspace, it's definitely been like a learning curve for me, and just fully accepting who I am and like in this space. And it's not just like a professional space, it's also you connecting with community and representing a lot of different parts of yourself in the environmental field, which does still really need a lot of representation. So I think just like showing up as myself and letting people know that I'm here and that I'm doing the work, and letting them know that if they love this work too, that they can totally do it, and that it's a space for them as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Arlene. I think just to kind of close it off with the next question, I think you've all mentioned this. I think it's overwhelming trying to find like your niche, something that you're passionate about, especially at a very young age. Like in high school, I, for example, had no idea what I wanted to do, but life has its way of kind of like giving you hints and guidance. But since we currently have you on this call, what advice would you give to those students, you know, trying to find their passion? Let's go with Anna, Megan, and Arlene.
Yeah, I would just say try a bunch of different things. That's kind of how I realized what I don't like to do, which I think is very important. So I did the policy internship, like people mentioned. I would also just talk to people who were doing certain jobs and kind of ask them like, how does your day-to-day look like? Basically what you're doing now by coming to this panel, you're already preparing and working towards trying to find something that you like to do. And I would say just, yeah, don't be afraid to say like, this is actually not for me. So really like knowing your own strengths and your own weaknesses and your own interests. And then also like thinking about all of these things and your own skills is like really a work in progress. Like I even still say like scientists like work in training, you know, because like you're always learning and growing, and there's always so much to learn. And I know even Arlene mentioned she didn't know anything about urban forestry before she started her position, and you kind of figure it out and learn as you go. So I would say like don't be, yeah, and I had never even worked in a wet lab, like doing, you know, basic chemistry. I'd never used like a pipette until I started my research, and I just learned it's just like tying your shoe. You just kind of learn. No one's born knowing how to do any of this stuff. So try to keep that in mind and be gentle with yourself, because it takes time as well. But you're already making good steps by coming to things like this. So that's awesome.
Yes, yes, yes to everything you just said, Anna. I would also add that we should like maybe let go of the idea that something that you pick as like your first job is going to be you're locked into that path, and just like try a few bunch of things. Like there's nothing such thing as like forever, you're like forever locked into a career path. You can always make a decision to leave or switch. I think also honing in your story has been one of the most powerful things I've ever done. It's been able for me to connect with anybody, especially if unfortunately you have to go through the whole, you know, song and dance of interviews and cover letters. But I've seen the strongest cover letters is when people tell a personal story versus copy paste a template that they saw online. You know, all the other applicants are going to do that, but how are you going to stand out different? You're going to tell your story that's unique to you, and people can connect to you, people, versus something that sounds robotic. So I would recommend honing your story. Another thing is, Anna mentioned asking people questions. Something I found really powerful is the informational interview. I'll type it in the chat. But the informational interview is a template where you can actually ask people, you know, who you think has a cool job, and be like, hey, can we have an informational interview? I'd love to talk with you for 30 minutes and ask you a bunch of questions about your path. And that is one way I've kind of explored so many different careers, and know like I definitely do not want to be in education. I definitely do not want to be a scientist, but maybe something in education or like outreach would be helpful. And lastly, my other advice is sometimes things that you like were criticized for, or maybe weren't appreciated. Like, for example, for me, I was a very loud and outgoing person. And in school, when I needed to be quiet and listen, people didn't appreciate that. But now look at me. They call me the megaphone. I'm loud. I'm on microphones. I'm on like leading chants and marches. And sometimes a seed, when it's planted in concrete, it won't grow. But when it's planted in beautiful, nutritious soil, it'll blossom and grow. Anna, you'll love that analogy. But yeah, so you know, I definitely think like your unique story, your traits, is your strength and your power. So find a place that will value you for who you are and ignore the haters, whatever. What about you, Arlene?
I love that, Megan. I think I want to add to that story piece of like finding your story is also big on finding who you are. It doesn't even have to be like career-wise or education. It's just like what brings you joy, what do you like what sparks your interest, and like not being afraid to like go and try new things, meet new people. You'll never really find out who you are until you kind of like branch out and like try different things. And then I think that's going to guide you a lot in your like ultimate decision making for like your career or whatever the bigger decisions are. I think knowing yourself and who you are is really big on that. But definitely what Megan said, like owning your story, knowing who you are, where you come from.
Thank you all. I honestly felt the energy. I loved all the responses, and I definitely want to allow others on this call to ask their own questions, whether it's for all the panelists on this call or if it's for a specific person. You're more than welcome to ask. Don't feel pressure to yourself. If you prefer to type your question, please do so. One of us will go ahead and read it. But if you are comfortable, go ahead and raise your hand and we will call on you.
Sorry, question for the panelists.
Arlene.
Sorry, Anna. I love what you do. I think soil science is so special because of like the finite resource that it does. And I don't think people really realize like how much of a protective barrier it is, like literally to everything. But I was wondering for like the soil testing that you do, is it usually like big ag or like big farms? Or is it like smaller scale?
Yeah, thanks so much for the question. Actually, most people don't think of soil as anything, but they just think of it as dirt, right? But actually soil is like alive and functioning. And thinking about climate change, like soil actually has more carbon than all the land plants and the atmosphere combined. So it's a really big, important kind of role in, thinking about all of these bigger topics. So I actually came into working to my project wanting to really work with female farmers because that's a really, most of the kind of agriculture industry is very male dominated, and not even getting into like the diversity and lack of people of color in farming and in land ownership is a really another big thing. And also thinking about big ag, right? And like who controls the land and versus smaller agriculture. So right now I'm actually working with the USDA, so the United States Department of Agriculture, and they have a big research field in Salinas, which allows us to install all kinds of like nerdy scientific equipment in the soil to really study and measure all these different things, which is hard for an operational farm to have all this equipment in the field because they have to go in and plant and weed and all these things. I am working with a couple farms in terms of the compost projects that I'm doing. And those are some smaller farms in Salinas and then kind of down the valley. But my dream would be to work with a network of smaller farms and also female farmers and people of color to really kind of meet their needs as science, because normally the money goes to the bigger farms and maybe don't need the resources as much. But yeah, thinking about who you work with is also a really good question, right? Like who do you want your work to impact? And I think that's another way to figure out what kind of work you want to do with your career.
Thank you. I also noticed that Bree and Emma have raised their hands, so if you would like to come off mute or type your question in the chat.
I was wondering if like there's been any for Megan, if there's been any time where like she's like felt discouraged about like activism efforts, like protesting for something to happen, but then it doesn't go.
Yeah, thanks for that question. That is 100% so real. I feel that honestly every day. It's definitely a slippery slope for burnout and just like like pessimism and despair for sure. Like there's definitely super high highs when we get a win and we're like building momentum, and there's super low lows when we're constantly disappointed. And there's so much suffering with what's happening in the world. So it is a balance that that you actively have to practice to hold. And practices like building a strong community that will care for me when I need it, to either collectively grieve or to collectively build joy is something. But also spending time in nature also recharges me, like I shared earlier. And I was like, oh, I remember why I do what I do, and it's so worth it, and I'm going to keep going. But another thing is I've actively made a choice to live the world that I want to build and live in the world that I want to live in, instead of waiting for someone to give it to me, like through policy or whatever authority. I'm actively building the world and living by the values that I want to see. So that can happen on a small local scale. Like I have my friends over for dinner every week and we share that space. And sometimes when someone's going through a really hard time, we'll like drop everything and go see them. And that's the kind of care and community I want to build in versus like, I don't know what policy we're waiting for, but just because I just don't know if it's going to happen. And with climate change and everything getting worse every year, I just don't want to wait for someone to grant me this future. I'm going to actively grab it myself and make it happen. So it's a balance for sure. And I don't look at the news every day anymore. I just try to fill my life with joy, but then hold people accountable when I can, but it's a balance. So thank you for your question.
I do want to be mindful of time, but it looks like Daphne has a question. Daphne, what's your question?
Hi, yeah. So thank you so much to all the panelists. Everything you said was really inspiring. I just wanted to ask, um, so in general, like the environmental sector might not be as well paying as some like STEM and tech fields. So do you think that's often a challenge for people in like green careers?
That is such a good question, Daphne. I would say there are some organizations like the bigger nonprofits that have more money. Nonprofits have money. They're just stingy and don't want to pay people. And I, from the inside, am definitely saying something. Don't you worry. But this is definitely something that y'all should always like negotiate your salary. Always try to ask for more money. If they don't give you more money, ask for more vacation days. I would say like the balance in the beginning, and it's getting better. Like people are recognizing that people who want to work in nonprofits need to get paid more. So look for the organizations that post salary ranges. If they don't post a salary range, that's a red flag. And they're probably underpaying their people. So make sure there are definitely organizations and positions that are paid really well within the like 50 to like 70 range as like entry level. And then you can like slowly build as you get like a manager level, director level, you can make like up to 100K. So there is money in environmental fields. You just want to work for the good ones. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'll definitely add to Megan's answer. I think Canopy does believe in like a livable wage. So that's something that I really appreciate about our organization. But I think like just from a lot of my colleagues at school, like they did not join the environmental studies department for money, which I think is something that's changing. Something really big about the environmental field is that people do believe that people need to be front and center in the work that we do. And I think that's translating in a lot of different facets of our work, including pay and compensation. So to Megan's point, definitely look at the organizations that you're interested in working and make sure that they represent the same ideals that you want to manifest into this world.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm definitely still not in school because I'm in this for the money. Yeah, I think it's really important to think about how we're redistributing resources and considering, you know, income and also the other factors of your career. And everyone has a different situation. I want to just say that I always tell students that you can always be a climate fill in the blank or whatever career that you decide, right? Like we need engineers who think about climate and sustainability. We need teachers, we need dentists, we need like all these people who think about how we can kind of change our impact on the earth and think about being an environmental career. So I think if we can shift all of those careers to really be, you know, thinking about this, then I think that's, you can kind of be in any career and still make a really big impact. And like locally, even in your own house or your own school or classroom, like if you start changing things, then it can really kind of spread to a bigger area, and then you can have an impact without having that as your full career as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I just want to add that with like green careers, like you don't necessarily have to work for an environmental nonprofit. I guess if you have to work in tech, you know, for money or reasons, which I totally understand, there are like green jobs in that kind of field. Like, you know, there's like the whole corporate sustainability as a path, industrial health. So there are different ways where you can kind of get creative. But yeah, you can wear that like environmental justice lens really in any kind of career you want. I think it's just about values.
Yeah. Thank you, Megan. I think you worded it perfectly. The green field does not have to look standard how we all tend to look at it. It's definitely very broad. Megan mentioned corporate. As long as you find something that you're passionate about, you can definitely make it work. So we are at time, but as one of the panelists mentioned, I will drop their contact information again. You're more than welcome to reach out to them. Hopefully that's okay, panelists. But with that being said, this is not the last series. Let me go ahead and share my screen. We have 3 more. So hopefully y'all are able to make it. We have a couple on this month. One is on careers in nonprofits and another one in the outdoors. And then finally, we're going to close it off with a conversation with Canopy staff so that you can all get to know Canopy a little bit better. But with that being said, can y'all help me in thanking our guest panelists for today, maybe going off mute and giving them a couple of shout outs?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.